There are stories whispered beneath the moss of time, forgotten names, half-told legends, places you only find when you're lost and you're never quite sure you made it back. This story is one of those. You won't find it in school books. It isn't taught in churches or retold around campfires. The few who knew it are long gone, and even they never spoke of it after sunset. But there was once a house, a family, and 2 little girls. Born on a night the moon turned red. Bath County, Kentucky -1834. The hills of Bath County were restless that summer. Rain had stopped falling weeks earlier. Corn wilted in the fields. Animals grew anxious, refusing to eat or sleep. Farmers blamed it on weather. Old folks whispered about other things that lived in hollows and crept between trees. But mostly, people stayed quiet, kept their heads down, waited for the sky to turn again, and then on the 17th of July it did. The moon, normally soft and silver, rose over the hills soaked in a deep crimson. It wasn't an eclipse, not entirely. More like a curtain had dropped across the sky, heavy, drenched. In a small log cabin, buried between 2 creeks, a woman screamed into the night. Mary Bellamont, 32, barefoot and alone, save for her husband, Joseph, gritted her teeth and pushed. She had been in labor for nearly a day. Their first child, they believed, but that night would deliver more than they expected. Joseph, a farmer raised on hardship, had never looked so afraid. His hands, more used to holding axes and reins, trembled as he tried to help. The first child came quickly, tiny, silent, and swaddled in a blood-stained sheet. A girl. They were still cleaning her when Mary cried out again. A second child emerged. Same face, same crylessness. Another girl. They had no names yet, no plan for 2. The midwife never made it through the floodwaters, so it was just them, a family of 4. Alone in the woods, Mary, pale and shaken, looked down at her daughters. They stared back, eyes too wide, too calm, no tears, just silence. Joseph whispered a prayer he barely remembered. He didn't say it for them, he said it for what might follow. Weeks later, Mary began keeping a diary, not for memories, for evidence. She had grown up in a house full of story superstitions passed down by women who never smiled without reason. Her grandmother always warned, when children come in 2s, check if the mirror lies. She didn't know what that meant. Until now, greater than they never cry. They sleep holding each other's hands. They seem to know things like when someone knocks before it happens. Like they hear thoughts I haven't spoken yet. Abigail smiled today when I dropped a pot in the kitchen. I was in the house. She was outside. Joseph didn't want to hear it. He worked longer days. Came home later. Said the girls were just quiet. But Mary knew quiet. These children weren't that. They were listening. By the time the girls turned to, they were speaking. Not English, not anything Mary or Joseph could understand. It had rhythm, repeating consonants and vowels, like a chant. At first, it was soft, private, whispers between cribs. Then it grew. They would sit across from each other and talk for hours, in perfect cadence. Sometimes, they would pause Durand, then both laugh without a word exchanged. Mary tried recording the sounds in her journal. Greater than Kashal-en-Ra Veidun, Kashal-en-Ra, over and over. She brought it to the church. The pastor read it and frowned. He said it sounded like nothing he knew, but he warned her to stop writing it down. Some words aren't meant to be repeated. He muttered, crossing himself. Chickens stopped laying eggs. Cows grew sick. Crops refused to rise. Joseph blamed soil and bad luck. But Mary noticed it started the day the twins watched a crow die in their yard. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They watched it flutter and collapse. Then one of them mimicked the sound perfectly. The coughing, the gurgle. That night, Mary woke to find feathers scattered on the floorboards. No bird had entered the house. The first real scare came at age 4. The girls began waking up in the middle of the night, screaming. But it was never one without the other. Always both. Simultaneous. Wordless terror. They'd point to corners of the room, corners where nothing could be seen. One night, Mary caught them drawing in soot on the fireplace stone. Circular patterns, eyes, teeth. She asked where they'd seen it. They said, in the dream, where she waits. Mary asked who. They both whispered, the woman with no eyes. Word traveled. A friend of Joseph's had connections to a doctor in Lexington who studied unusual childhood development. He came out, reluctantly traveling by horse over broken roads. He observed the girls for 2 days. He found nothing wrong, medically, but on the 3rd morning, he left before sunrise. Refused to eat, refused payment. His only words as he left the cabin were, don't separate them. It was the neighbor's son, 11 years old. He'd been teasing the girls for weeks, called them ghost babies and mocked their speech. One afternoon, he wandered into the woods and never came back. 3 days later, his dog returned whimpering, covered in mud. They found his body near the old creek. No wounds, no struggle, but his eyes were open, and his mouth was twisted wide in terror. The twins didn't say a word. But that night, Mary found them sleeping peacefully, hands folded, and smiling. More visitors arrived in the years that followed. Asterisk, a clergyman from Virginia, a professor from Cincinnati, a folk healer from the mountains, all left with different explanations. None stayed. More than a day, the clergyman tried to bless the house. He collapsed before finishing the prayer. The professor offered to take the girls for study. Mary refused. The folk healer looked at them, whispered a prayer in Cherokee, and walked backward out the door. He never came back. The forest around their home grew dense, thicker than before. Trees leaned in closer. Paths disappeared. Neighbors began crossing the street when they saw Mary or Joseph in town. Children were told not to speak to the family, and the girls, they never seemed aged. At 8 years old, their hair was still perfectly curled, their skin smooth, their eyes untouched by time or trauma. But every night, the same ritual returned. They'd lie in bed, faces toward the ceiling, hands intertwined, and they'd speak softly, like prayer, in their language. Until the candles snuffed themselves out. In the far-removed hollows of Bath County, 2 girls were born, identical, silent, and unnatural. They spoke a language never taught. They dreamed identical nightmares. They watched the world with matching expressions, as though reacting not to what was but to something none of us could see. Visitors came. Experts left shaken. Even nature recoiled, but this was only the beginning. It began subtly. At exactly 9:16 every evening, Abigail and Annalise would sit cross-legged on the wooden floor beside the hearth. They would face each other, eyes locked, and begin humming a low melody, one that rose and fell like waves. No one taught it to them. Mary never sang lullabies. Joseph couldn't keep a tune if his life depended on it. Still, the girls performed it nightly. Then came the candles. They insisted on lighting 4 always for each placed precisely at the corners of the room. If even one was off by an inch, they'd scream until it was corrected. One night, Joseph moved a candle intentionally to test them. He laughed as he slid it to the left just a little. The girls didn't scream. They stared at him, together, for a full minute. That night, Joseph dreamt of a black corridor filled with eyes. None blinked. None turned away. Next morning, he woke with his hand covered in scratches. The Bellamonts kept an old family Bible on the mantel, passed down from Joseph's great-grandfather. It was worn, dog-eared, and precious. Mary used to read from it aloud every Sunday. That stopped one morning after Abigail reached for it. Cumberland tore a page. Clean out. Not just any page. Leviticus 20:27. The one that read, "A man or woman who is a medium or spiritist among you must be put to death." She didn't tear it in frustration. She tore it while smiling. Later that night, Mary found the same page torn under the twins' bed, scratched into it in soot. "We are not them." By age 9, the twins began drawing more frequently. They used ash from the fire, charcoal, and even crushed berries. But what was disturbing wasn't the drawings themselves. It was that they were always identical, not similar. Identical. Every tree, every crooked line, every shadow, side by side. Each drawing matched the other down to the smallest smear. Once, Mary tore up Abigail's drawing and hid it in a cupboard. The next morning, she found an exact replica under an pillow. The subject of the drawings, a tall, eyeless woman with limbs too long and fingers like needles. They never named her. They didn't have to. The neighbor girl, Elsie McGrath, had taken to following the twins from a distance. She was 11, curious, bold. One afternoon, she was seen on the path behind the Bellamonts' woods, tracking the girls. At a distance, her parents warned her not to. She didn't come home for supper. They found her bonnet hanging from a branch 2 miles into the forest. No blood, no tracks, no body. The twins were questioned. They said nothing, but Abigail had a scratch down her cheek the next morning, one shaped eerily like a small hand. Mary began sleeping with a carving knife under her pillow. Joseph didn't speak at all anymore. One winter morning, Annalise slipped while helping with firewood. She sliced her palm open on a splintered log. Joseph bandaged it. She didn't flinch. An hour later, Abigail fainted in the kitchen. When Mary rolled up her sleeve, a trail of dried blood ran from her hand across the same palm, but there was no wound, just blood. Both girls were taken to the doctor again, the same one who once said, "Don't separate them." Now he gave them another warning. Greater than they share, more than flesh. They might share spirit. Joseph refused to believe it until the next event. Enough was enough. Joseph wrote to Mary's cousin in Virginia. Arrangements were made. Abigail would go. Just for a month, they said. To rest, to be observed, to see if it helped. The day before her departure, the girls sat together at the window, whispering in their secret language. They didn't eat, didn't drink. Mary kissed Abigail goodbye. She didn't say goodbye to Annalise. Annalise said it first. She won't come back. They put it down to childish fear. They would come to regret that. 3 nights into Abigail's stay with the cousin, Mary woke suddenly. The clock read 3:16 a.m. She felt cold. Not from the air but something else. Like the room had stopped breathing. Down the hallway, Annalise screamed. She was curled on the floor, convulsing, bleeding from the nose. Pale as snow, Mary screamed for Joseph. By the time they reached her, she was still. Not dead. Not moving. Breathing but shallow, eyes wide open. Joseph ran to the barn to fetch the wagon. By dawn, a telegram arrived. From Virginia, Abigail had died in her sleep. The time, 3:16 a.m. Abigail's body arrived by train 2 days later. Joseph refused to let Mary see it. He buried her himself in a pine box. Analyse remained in bed. No sound, no tears. Just eyes, watching the ceiling, watching something the rest of them couldn't see. The priest returned for a final blessing. When he entered her room, he vomited into his hat and left. He would never return to the county again. Later that week, Mary found Annalise's drawing on the wall above her bed. It showed two girls walking into the forest, hand in hand. One was shaded darker than the other, and both were smiling. With no choice left, the Bellamonts sent Annalise to the St. Eleanor's Home for the Fragile-Minded in Louisville. It was the only facility that would take her. The doctors were kind. At first, they tried to engage her, feed her, rehabilitate her, but nothing worked. She sat by the window, every day, staring west. She never spoke, until one nurse, young and curious, asked her what she was looking for. Annalise turned her head, smiled. She's still with me. There are certain silences that sound like they're listening. And at St. Eleanor's Home for the Fragile-Minded, there was one room, 3rd floor, corner window where, silenced in it, just listen. It remembered. St. Eleanor's was not built for children. Its halls echoed with the mutterings of forgotten war veterans, women who lost whole families in fires, and old men who stared into corners mumbling about birds that didn't blink. But in 1843, they made an exception for a girl who didn't cry, didn't speak, and hadn't blinked in over 3 days. Her name was Annalise Bellamont. Room 307 was made for her, painted white, stripped of mirrors, no sharp edges. The doctors drew up guidelines immediately. Do not place her near windows during a thunderstorm. Do not speak to her about her sister. Do not allow her to draw. Do not under any circumstance let her see her own reflection. The last one puzzled the new staff. But those who met her eyes never asked again. 2 months in, nothing had changed. Analyse remained silent. She neither responded to light nor voice. Her eyes tracked movement, but her lips never moved. Until Nurse Lydia made a mistake. She brought in a small silver tray during lunch. Annalise caught her reflection. Her own eyes widened for the first time in months, and then her lips parted. She spoke, not in English, not in gibberish. She whispered the same string of sounds, 3 times. Cashel and raw. Then she smiled. The tray vibrated slightly on the table. The water in the glass tipped over, and Lydia dropped to the floor, unconscious. Dr. Everett Mallory had studied minds for nearly 2 decades. He prided himself on separating faith from fact, belief from biology. Until Annalise Bellamont, he began a private journal, never to be published. Greater than her neural reflexes are intact, motor skills functional, but she does not initiate conversation, movement, or expression unless exposed to specific triggers. She does not fear darkness, but seems wary of mirrors. Patients in neighboring rooms report hearing her breathe behind them, even when she's asleep. One elderly woman claimed Annalise entered her dreams and gave her names. The names were her children, all dead. Mallory wanted to dismiss it, but the woman died the following morning. And the names she wrote before her death, all were real. One of the strangest incidents was documented on July 2, 1844. Annalise was found bleeding from her shoulder. 3 long scratches as though clawed. No one had entered her room. No objects were within reach. But that same night, a nurse named Elizabeth had a nightmare. One of the strangest incidents was documented on July 2, 1844. Annalise was found bleeding from her shoulder. 3 long scratches as though clawed. No one had entered her room. No objects were within reach. But that same night, a nurse named Elizabeth had a nightmare. In the dream, she saw 2 little girls. One tried to speak. The other had her hand over her mouth. A third figuretal head, covered in a black veil, held a needle dripping with blood. Elizabeth woke screaming. Her shoulder was bandaged in 3 places. She didn't remember why. Room 307 was eventually avoided. The staff rotated care every week. No one lasted more than 6 nights. Why? Each of them described the same thing. At exactly 2:44 a.m., they would wake to see a figure standing in the corner of the room. Not moving, not speaking, but watching Annalise, and she would be sitting upright, awake, smiling, always. There was a tree outside her window, a red maple. For years, sparrows and blue jays nested there, but after Annalise arrived, they stopped coming. Worse, those who flew near would freeze mid-flight, drop from the air like stones. Students from the nearby seminary came to observe it. One boy tried to capture the event with a sketch. He died in his sleep that night. No cause found, just an expression of pure terror on his face. A maintenance worker named Russell ignored the rule about reflections. Asterisk 1. Morning. He carried a new sink into her room with a polished steel surface. Asterisk. She saw it. She didn't scream. Asterisk. She simply looked behind her, then tilted her head. Russell, confused, turned around. There was nothing. But later that day, he was found in the boiler room, staring into a cracked piece of mirror. He repeated one phrase over and over, "She's not done yet." He was institutionalized at another hospital 2 weeks later. Asterisk. The strangest incident of all was confirmed by 5 members of staff simultaneously. Asterisk. On October 17th, at 3:16 p.m., exactly 9 years to the minute from Abigail's death, all the clocks on the 3rd floor stopped. Asterisk. Watches froze. Ink and pens hardened. Windows refused to open. Asterisk. In inside room 307, Annalise stood upright for the first time in over a year. She looked directly into Dr. Mallory's eyes and said, "She wants me back." He asked who. Annalise walked to the window, pressed her forehead to the glass, and replied, "The one who follows." A lesser-known story was told only in hushed gossip. Asterisk. A worker in the laundry room recalled sending down Annalise's linens, stained with blood and soot. When the load returned 2 hours later, her sheets were still wet, but not from water, from mud, and faintly, on the pillowcase were 2 handprints, much larger than Annalise's. One nurse claimed she saw something pressed against the laundry chute that night, a face, mouth open, no eyes. It happened only once. Asterisk. At 2 a.m., the hallway lights shorted out. Footsteps were heard sprinting across the 3rd floor corridor. Asterisk. The guards responded instantly, expecting a patient breakout. Asterisk. But every room was locked, except one, room 307, empty. Panic ensued. The grounds were searched. The bells were rung, until Nurse Lydia checked the chapel. There on the altar was Annalise, kneeling, smiling, and in her hands a child's locket. It was Abigail's. No one knew how it got there. It had been buried in Virginia with the body. Asterisk. June 6, 1867. Annalise Bellamont died quietly in her sleep. No trauma, no struggle. She was 33 years old. She hadn't aged a day past 16. The final notes from Dr. Mallory read, "Greater than no cause of death. No degeneration of organs. Brain mass unchanged. Skin unwrinkled, eyes unblinking." Asterisk. Final item found clutched in hand, folded paper, words written, "She was never alone." Asterisk. They buried her next to her sister, but the grave refused to settle. For weeks, the soil sank. Animals avoided the site. Eventually, they placed a slab of stone to seal it. But cracks appeared by the 2nd month, and late at night, some say you can still hear 2 girls whispering in the wind. Asterisk.